Picture this. It's 1987. A teenager comes home from school. No phone, no messages, no notifications. They drop their bag, turn on the TV, and wait for their favorite show. If they miss it, that's it. It's gone forever. Their parents are still at work. They make their own snack, do their homework alone, figure things out on their own. That teenager grows up, and today they're raising kids in a world they never imagined. That teenager belongs to Generation X. And understanding the psychology of Gen X explains why they think the way they do, why they struggle quietly, and why they don't complain, but also don't trust easily. Who is Generation X? Generation X includes people born roughly between 1965 and 1980. They came after baby boomers and before millennials. They are often called the forgotten generation, the latchkey generation, the silent survivors, not because they're weak, but because they learned early that no one was coming to save them, and that belief shaped their entire psychology. The latchkey child effect. One of the biggest psychological influences on Gen X is something called the latchkey child effect. Many Gen X kids came home to empty houses. Both parents worked. Divorce rates were rising. Adults were stressed and absent. So Gen X learned early, I'll handle it myself. Psychologically, this creates extreme independence, emotional self-control, difficulty asking for help. They didn't grow up being constantly checked on. They grew up being trusted too early. And when a child grows up too fast, the adult becomes emotionally cautious. Why Gen X doesn't trust easily? Gen X grew up watching governments lie, corporations fail, jobs disappear overnight, promises break. They lived through economic recessions, Cold War fear, corporate layoffs, rising crime rates. So their brain learned one rule: nothing is guaranteed. This created a deep psychological trait, healthy skepticism mixed with quiet anxiety. They don't trust hype. They don't believe get rich quick. They don't assume systems will protect them. That's why Gen X questions authority, hates fake optimism, values realism over motivation. They don't want inspiration, they want proof. Why Gen X hates attention? Unlike younger generations, Gen X does not crave validation. They grew up without likes, shares, comments, public praise, so their reward system developed differently. Psychologically, they measure success internally. They don't need applause to feel worthy. They feel uncomfortable being praised publicly. This is why Gen X often says, just do your job. Not because they're cold, but because they were trained to be self-contained. The emotional style of Gen X. Gen X doesn't express emotions loudly. They express them through humor, through sarcasm, through silence. This doesn't mean they feel less. In fact, psychology shows people who learn to suppress emotions early often feel them more deeply, but show them less. Gen X learned crying doesn't change reality. Complaining doesn't fix problems. Action matters more than words, so they adapted. Why Gen X uses dark humor? Ever noticed how Gen X jokes are darker? That's not accidental. Dark humor is a psychological coping mechanism. When life feels uncertain, humor becomes a shield, a release, a form of control. Laughing at pain makes it feel manageable. For Gen X, humor isn't entertainment, it's survival. The work ethic psychology. Gen X watched their parents lose pensions, get replaced, work for decades, and still struggle. So they developed a mindset: no job is permanent. Psychologically, this made them hard workers, skill collectors, loyal but not blindly loyal. They don't expect companies to care about them. They expect themselves to be prepared. That's why Gen X values competence, respects experience, hates micromanagement. Why Gen X feels invisible today? Here's something rarely talked about. Gen X is sandwiched between loud boomers, vocal millennials, and hyper-online Gen Z. So Gen X often feels unseen. Psychologically, this can cause quiet burnout, emotional withdrawal, a sense of being left behind. They don't complain about it, they just internalize it. And internalized stress doesn't disappear, it settles. Gen X and technology, adapters, not natives. Gen X grew up offline and aged online. They didn't grow up with technology, they learned it. That's psychologically important. It made them flexible thinkers, strong adapters, less dependent on digital validation. They remember life before the internet, so they don't confuse online life with real life. Parenting style of Gen X. Gen X parents often do something interesting. They try to give their kids more emotional support than they received, more freedom than strict rules, more honesty than authority. But sometimes they struggle to express affection verbally, open up emotionally, ask for help as parents, because they were never taught how. The inner conflict of Gen X. Here's the quiet truth. Gen X often feels torn between wanting independence and wanting connection. They crave freedom, but also wish someone would notice their effort. They're strong, but tired of being strong. Psychologically, this creates emotional fatigue, silent stress, private reflection. Why Gen X values authenticity? Gen X can smell fake energy instantly. Why? Because they grew up without filters, without branding, without curated personalities. So their brain learned to trust actions over words, consistency over charisma, depth over noise. They don't chase trends, they wait for substance. The hidden strength of Gen X. Gen X doesn't talk about resilience, they live it. They survived economic instability, emotional neglect, cultural shifts, technological revolutions. They adapted without applause, and that creates a powerful psychological trait, quiet resilience. They don't need to announce growth, they embody it. Why Gen X doesn't seek permission? Gen X learned early, if you want something done, do it yourself. So they start without approval, learn without instruction, solve without asking. This makes them great leaders, strong problem solvers, independent thinkers, but also emotionally guarded, reluctant to lean on others. Generation X is not loud. They don't demand attention. They don't chase validation. They don't trend easily. But they are the bridge generation, the adapters, the quiet architects of modern life. They held the world together while learning how to survive it. And if you're Gen X watching this, your strength was never invisible. It was just silent. If this video made you feel understood or helped you understand someone in your life better, subscribe for more deep psychology breakdowns like this. We explore the mind, behavior, and the hidden stories behind who we are. And tell me in the comments, what generation should we break down next?